Welcome to the What's Your Story podcast with Al&Sal. And we thank you for joining us for our episode number 2, or as they say in Spanish, Espiada dos. And to all my Spanish-speaking friends, if I hack that translation up, I apologize. I can barely speak English properly. So, we have an exciting announcement for you guys today. Al is back. That was a short applause, Al. You cut that applause.
Yeah, well.
So Al is back. We're very excited to have him back. He was on vacation last week. And how was your vacation, Al?
It was good till the end. Thank you.
What happened at the end?
I got stuck in Florida for 3 days extra.
I don't mind being stuck in Florida. That's a good place to get stuck.
Not for $3,000 it wasn't.
No, you had to drive back.
You had to drive back, yep.
How was petting the sloths?
It was...
Did you have a good time?
Yeah, it was boring. The sloths didn't do too much. They moved really slow.
Now, a question for you. Who is faster, you or the sloth?
The sloth by
a nose? Or?
Anybody ever see me work, they know the sloth is faster.
Yeah, well, yes. So, Al, I know you are excited for this guest today.
Yes, I am.
Very excited. And with us today is our guest, Miss Lauren Malloy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys inviting me.
Now, I know I'm excited, but Al is super excited. Do you know why Al is super excited?
No, I don't.
Well, let me just tell you why. He actually prepared for this podcast.
Oh, cool.
This is the first podcast that he's ever prepared for. He actually has notes. Show the notes, Al.
That makes one of us.
Lots and
lots of notes.
I have notes, too.
Yeah, so... Actually, he likes you. I think you're right up there with Cheetos.
Oh, that's cool. Or he's like getting ready to just take me down. This is going to be like, I'm in the hot seat.
You think so? Well,
100%.
We'll see. Yeah, but he likes you just as much as Cheetos, and he really likes Cheetos.
I really like Cheetos.
He's a big fan.
People who don't like Cheetos, we got to question their motives.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Lauren, I got a story for you since this is What's Your Story.
Yeah.
So, on our last podcast, there was a talk about divine appointment.
Yep. Okay. R. Kevin Dodge, right?
Yes,
Kevin Dodge.
R. Kevin Dodge. Yes. Divine appointment.
Yeah.
And you are a divine appointment as well. See,
that's cool.
It is. It was pretty more impressive story than the last one. See, on our last season, we had what's your name? Oh, Al. Yes, Al. Al's friend Matt on. He was a state trooper.
Oh, yeah, okay. I haven't listened to that one yet, but I saw that in the archives.
Yes.
It's on the list.
And so after that podcast, me and Al worked together, and he said, hey, Sal, I was talking to Matt, and he feels that we should do something on cold cases.
Oh, that's cool.
And I said, oh, that's pretty cool, Al. I said, well, what do you know about cold cases, Al? He says, absolutely nothing. And I know nothing as well. So... we just left it at that.
Yeah.
So the next morning, I'm getting ready for work, but in the meantime, I'm probably eating breakfast, and I'm on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm scrolling, because I'm a scroller. Anybody else scroller?
Oh, yeah.
Are you a scroller? Yeah, I get a problem with that. So I was scrolling, and I come across a video, and it was from Jared Tillinghast.
Oh, goodness.
Who happens to be your...
He is my cousin, and I say that in quotes. He's an illegitimate cousin, but he's real family.
Okay, so he's an illegitimate cousin.
Uh-huh.
So he does a Thanksgiving drive.
Oh, yes.
Which I think, are you like a coordinator?
I was a big part of that last one, yeah.
A big part, yes. Uh-huh. So he has a boxing gym, and everybody's in the ring, politicians and whatnot.
Yep.
And everybody's speaking. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, Jared says... my next person I want to speak needs no introduction. It is my cousin, Lauren Malloy. So up steps Lauren.
Oh, yeah.
And she says, hi, I'm Lauren. I help coordinate this for Jared. Also, I am from Unsolved RI. And I handle missing person and cold cases. So that was the next morning.
Wow.
It wasn't even like a week, a month, a year. It was the next morning.
That's spooky.
You got goosebumps, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes, you should.
That's wild.
Because that is definitely a divine appointment.
That's
how God works.
Wow.
So, You started Unsolved RI. And can you give us audience a brief synopsis of what Unsolved RI is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also took notes.
Oh, she has
on my
3x5 index cards, people.
And
this
they're
should be
highlighted. So we
Are
started.
you a Virgo?
I am. Hey.
I knew it. I knew it just from the cards.
My people. So I started Unsolved RI about 8 months ago, but this has really been kind of a lifetime worth of work. Now it's just more public, I would say. We've grown to 3.6 thousand members on Facebook. We see between 20 and 55,000 visitors every week, and that's just on social media. On our site, we have sections for cold cases, which are now powered entirely by uncovered.com, which is a much larger platform. At this point, our friends over at Uncovered have over 1,000 active community members who are on their platform looking at cases, getting them visualized, working with families. Some of them are family members of victims themselves who are able to give their insights to not only their own loved one's case, but others. And there's over 37,000 cases and growing on the site. So right now it is the largest database. It's larger than the Charlie Project and NamUs, which is National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, which is kind of the gold standard, and they do incredible work. But it's amazing to see what's really happening with this larger group at Uncovered, and it's been such a blessing to bring not only their work, but also my passion to our local Rhode Island community.
Excellent. Al, we are recording, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just making sure because he was on vacation last week, and I didn't want to go through
yeah.
an hour interviewing.
So, you never know. I know it's like that. You're on mute has been like the line of the last couple of years.
So, what led you to start this organization?
Oh goodness, such a loaded question. And
it is.
Yeah,
but the people want to know, Lauren.
I know, and I never really do interviews. Like I do, but it's always about someone else's story or something brief about my mom's case, which is I think it's the elephant in every room. And my mom, Lori Lee Sled Dog Malloy, was 30 years old when she was found dead on the bathroom floor of our third floor apartment in East Providence. At the time I was 18 months old. I didn't know anything about what was going on until August of 2020 when a woman found me on Facebook and knew a lot of details about my family and about my mom's death that I'd never heard before. So it really led me to ask the question, what happened? Why? And you just start going down that rabbit hole. So for me, it's been, the last couple of years of looking into her case and trying to figure out what happened, and learning. Her case was originally declared, it was a suspicious death, and it was declared and investigated as a homicide originally. Her autopsy was conducted by a man who lost his license to practice in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and other places. And he basically got the entire thing wrong and said she passed from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is just this like rare incurable disease. But there was no evidence of it in the autopsy report. And we've since sort of learned her death is undetermined, cause and manner at this time. That's not officially printed on her death certificate, but it is confirmed by the medical examiner's office. I've been in contact with all different agencies about this, and I can certainly get more into it. But it was really not long after that woman reached out to me that I was sitting in my car outside of Pawtucket Police Department, which is where the Rhode Island Cold Case Unit is located. And I'd had a meeting with the head of the Cold Case Unit, and she's a wonderful woman. She's done a lot of great work in the state. Should totally have more support, I think. We certainly need it, obviously. But I remember sitting in my car and having this woman's business card and sitting there and going, I am on my own. no one's coming to save me. No one's coming to fix my mom's case or figure this out with me. I got to do it myself. So I started taking notes.
Okay.
And I had, my little notebook with me, and it was like, I'm going to rebuild my mom's entire case. And did it with the help of so many people, not just from the Uncovered platform, but a lot of local folks. And my cousin Jared, going back to him, when this all first started, we really hadn't been in close contact. Like, we obviously knew about each other after my mom died and everything. I was actually a lot of the time raised by the woman who was his godmother. And so, I always knew of him. But when things happened, I got scared, and I was like, I don't know if there's somebody out there who did kill my mom. Like, I can't talk about it. I don't know, like, how do you approach this? Nobody knew. And I felt like, well, what happens if there is somebody and they find out I'm looking for them and they come looking for me? So I went to him and I was like, hey guys, I kind of need your help. Can you teach me how to fight? And
did he teach you that left hook?
Oh, yeah, he did. He's a southpaw, too. So it was like, I remember that first lesson at the end of it. He looked at me and he was like, you know what your issue is? You've got it all here. And he was like, he pointed to my heart. He was like, you've got the heart and you've got the mind. He's like, you've just got to let go of the fear. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I feel like, Auntie, that's what he calls his godmother. He's like, I feel like Auntie kind of put us in each other's paths to, figure this out. And I'm going to help you and you're going to help me. Mm-hmm. And we really did. He recently lost his dad, and I lost my adopted dad a few years ago. So I think it was like he was teaching me to be a fighter, and I kind of was teaching him a little bit too in different ways. So you talk about divine appointment. I think of divine intervention in our lives, and just those moments of like, you're placed in the path of somebody who's supposed to teach you some type of lesson, and that's God just kind of protecting you.
Right, and I'm sure like you said, you helped each other out in that,
exactly,
in that process.
Exactly, and it was like I gained all that confidence, and I made more friends, and I built my network, and I continued learning. And then in September of 2021, the AG's office had a call with me, and I'm going to take a sip of water for this one.
Okay.
But I'll never forget that call. And a lot of folks have heard it at this point. But I spoke with the assistant attorney general who was working on my mom's case and supposed to be investigating it and hopefully getting it reopened and reclassified as a homicide. And he gets on the phone with me and he said, and I understand he's a great person. This isn't a knock against anybody personally, but there was one thing he said. He talked about me not getting my hopes up, that I was going to get answers on my mom's death. And, we might never know. And to me, that was just like, what? What do you mean don't get my hopes up? Our state motto is hope.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Like, did we elect you? And it was like, no, in that moment, and you can even hear it too. Like, I actually had posted it as like an informational resource for people to see where things really stood. But you can hear in my voice, I had COVID at the time. So I sound super nasally on the phone. It was the most miserable thing. And I was just like, respectfully, I'm not going to back down from this until I know how my mom died. She was supposed to have an autopsy and it was wrong. So after that, I started reaching out to people, and Channel 10 had originally said they were going to do a story. I think they're still interested, but there's been so many different things I've done. I haven't reached back out to them yet. Sorry, Channel 10. But I had started reaching out to people, and then I was like, well, if this media group is going to look at my mom's case, I don't want this to just be like a one and done. You're looking at my mom and she's just a fun story to boost your ratings. Yeah. I want this to be, we're able to shine a spotlight on other families, other victims that aren't getting any attention. And I knew like my mom would have wanted that. She was such a passionate advocate for people at a time where that wasn't understood or accepted, especially where she came from. And so I felt like that's how she would want her case to be made public, is by helping other people. So when I built out her page, I couldn't just build a website like as a tribute to my mom. Yeah. It felt weird to me me, but building it as like this community space where unsolved cold cases, missing persons, and it's kind of expanded to unsolved issues of all kinds, could really live and grow and become whatever it needed to be to get the goal accomplished.
Excellent. So this is your story. So you said you were 18 months when your mom passed. After that, who did take care of you?
So I actually had to, it's kind of a confusing timeline.
So we have several people stepping in?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's been...
You taking notes, Al?
I already have. I know the answer.
He's got this. He's like, I'm going to play this back. Yeah. Okay. He's ready. So I was born in 91. My mom, at the time, she was in the middle of a divorce from this guy, Harry Giovanni Mariano.
Scary Harry.
Scary Harry. I don't think he was that scary. I think he was kind of a chump. That's just me.
Excellent.
But he definitely had a temper problem, among other things. And in 1988, my mom called the police on him for him reportedly beating her. And he was actually wanted at the time for another felony case where he left the scene of an accident that resulted in serious injury or death. I don't know the details of that yet. We will. But anyway, so he goes to jail for that. She then is trying to divorce him. In 1990, the year before I'm born, he gets out of jail. He violates his protective order against her, and he goes after her again. By this time, she's met my birth father, Tom. And, he was also struggling in life. But from what I understand, and I don't remember him, but I understand he was a good person. He just needed a little more help than he ever got. But she's with him, and they kind of start moving around, hiding from Scary Harry and whatever else. And before you know it, they get pregnant with me. I'm born in September of 91. We were living in Providence at the time. And we moved to Warwick. And then my first real house as a baby when I was born was a trailer in Foster. Yeah. Literally a trailer. I've got pictures of it. It's like plywood boards and it wasn't very nice. But my father and my half brothers and my mom, tried to make it a home. That was where we started. And by July of 92, my mom left my father, Tom. Things didn't work out with him. And she was still in the middle of this divorce. She finally managed to serve Scary Harry in prison. He was in maximum security at the ACI at the time. And she moved back to East Providence, where she'd grown up. That was where we ended up at our final apartment on North Hull Street. And shortly after her divorce, which was granted December 28th of 92, we'd already moved into the apartment by then. She was found on March 7th of 93. The week prior to that, she visited the doctor to take a pregnancy test, as she had been in a relationship and had obviously moved on. I don't know the results of it, but the MEs today say she wasn't pregnant when she passed. It was just 3 weeks after she died, her divorce decree was final with Scary Harry.
Right.
A lot there. Yeah, that was kind of the start of things. And then when she died, my life kind of upended completely. My maternal grandmother, she was battling stage 4 ovarian cancer at the time. So she originally was going for custody of me. And my birth father obviously wanted to get custody of me as well. So it kind of resulted in this all-out war. Meanwhile, my mom's sister, Allison, who had been one of the original witnesses on the homicide investigation, she, sort of started working with my grandma when she realized my grandma wasn't going to make it, to take over and try to win me and keep me in the family. So by 96, my grandma had passed away, and Allison sort of takes over this custody battle and files against Tom. with her then boyfriend, Richard. Richard became my adopted dad. And I mean, I always say he's my real dad. You know, he was just the best. And you talk about divine appointment and intervention. That was my dad all day. So 1996, just before Christmas, I do remember the judge saying, "Merry Christmas, she's yours," and my adoption being finalized. I did not see my father again after that. And be very honest about it, there were allegations of abuse by him against me. I do remember being brought into the courtroom as a little kid and like holding this little stuffed seal and going in the back room and talking to these women who asked me, you know, touch the doll type of a thing. And it was, you know, I don't remember anything. And I don't even know if that happened or if that was, you know, unfortunately my Aunt Allison wasn't well either. And I think she was in a really tough spot of her sister passed and her mom passed and she was going to lose her niece. And how do you keep this child here in the family and her father from getting her? So I don't know about that one, but I do know once my adoption was finalized, you would think that that would be the end of it. It was not. Until from about 96 to 2001, I went back and forth to 3 different houses in a week. So I would like take a typical school day. This is the easiest way to explain it. I would go to school, get off the bus, and I always went to private schools, elementary and middle school. It was like really important for my family, even when they couldn't afford it. They always felt like education was going to be that thing that saved my life, and it did. But they would send me to school and I'd get off the bus. My dad would pick me up, bring me to his house on Glasgow Street in Providence, which is right near Vesey Street off of Branch Ave in Douglas. You know, it's had some rougher times, good, really hardworking families, but it, you know, definitely could use more resources and support. And I would go to my dad's house there for a few hours where I'd have dinner, do my homework, hang out with him and my dog. And then around like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, Allison would show up from wherever she was working, and she would take me to her boyfriend's house in Pawtucket. We did not have a lot of furniture there. We slept on blankets on the floor. We had a card table and like some folding chairs and stuff. And the one thing that we did have though was a lot of books. Allison was she called herself a special friend of this man, Musa Kalimula, who I credit him with teaching me how to speed read and getting me really interested in learning languages and, you know, always continuing my education. And we lived in a tough spot, but he had a lot of plants in this one room. And like, if you see my house today, I'm always told to like leave the plants at the door and not bring them in.
Who tells you that?
Yeah, right. I know. I'm looking over at my my agent and manager over here. I've got my family watching. But yeah, it was just, I mean, it was a tough time, but there were good things. And that was night times. I'd go there and fall asleep whatever time. And every night, the one thing I always did was I just always looked forward for whatever reason to like being 16. I always had like a goal in mind of like, when I'm 16, I'm going to be able to drive a car and like go to my dad's house and stay there. And like life's going to be good. But it kept me moving forward. And then the next day I would wake Allison up. She struggled with substance use issues. And so sometimes in the morning it was really hard for her to wake up. And when she would get me to school, which was not always the best process, she had a lot of anger struggles and would yell on the way to school. So I got really good at de-escalating situations with people who were just not doing so well. And on the weekend, so I would do that Monday to Friday. And then Friday afternoons, my dad would take me to the courthouse downtown. And his sister, Charlotte, Jared's godmother, worked at the courthouse. And she was just like my guardian angel. Like all day long, she would get out of work at 4:30 and she would take me to her house in Barrington for the weekend where I'd get to stay. And I just remember like being in her car and being a little kid and us, when we'd get on the highway, like I'd always be kind of holding my breath. And when we get to Barrington, it was like as soon as we hit the Wampanoag Trail, she would like always look in the rearview mirror and be like, we did it. We escaped for another weekend. We're here. And it was like, yes. So, that went on for a few years. And then in 2001, I started talking to my teachers. So I was going to this little private school in Barrington, and my teachers noticed that something was different. They made notes on my report cards that, my grades were great. I was still getting straight A's, but I was more quiet in class. And, now, years later, I understand that's a sign of a problem with a child. Back then, it was just, I'm going to keep all of this trauma to myself because I don't know what to do about it, and I don't want to get my family in trouble. So I started talking to one of my teachers at lunchtime. And next thing you know, they're calling in my Aunt Allison for a meeting with the principal. But before that, they put us alone in a room together while we waited. So, of course, she's sitting there, and it's, why would you tell them these things? I never did that to you. I would never. Do you not want to see your family again? Number one rule, if you're dealing with a child abuse case or a potential alleged child abuse case, don't put the abuser alone in the same room as the minor child.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm glad that many schools and companies and groups have adopted that obvious guideline for these situations. But back then, I think, it's neither here nor there. It happened. And I, of course, went into the principal's office and was like, nope, don't know what you're talking about. Everything's fine. And it still bothers some of the people who still work there. It bothers them to this day. They remember it. But in a way, it was kind of a blessing because I had amazing teachers at this school and Barrington Christian Academy and mentors who really did care about me. And, I know that you guys have a pretty faith-based following, I think, like your core audience. So I did actually write down my life verse from back then, which this was something we had like Bible verses we had to memorize every week. And for me, it was sort of like, okay, I'll memorize this Friday morning before I have to do the quiz and like not think of it. Mm-hmm. But there was always one verse that stuck with me. And to this day, it's like my life verse. And it was Philippians 3:13-14, which says, I don't consider myself to have yet taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting these things which are behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. And I liked that verse because you can take everything away from it, and it's just about like focus on a goal that's bigger than yourself. Right. For me now, the goal is justice. Back then, it was just survival. Yeah. So I started focusing on like, all right, I'm going to focus on my goals. I'm just going to keep hitting these goals. And that was probably like, 6th grade. I first heard that verse. And so then 2005, I started at Classical High School, and it was a fight to go there. My Aunt Allison wanted me to go to Al&Sal Academy. We could not afford it. I knew that by then. It was like that wasn't going to happen, and I was just going to be that bullied broke kid, getting called white trash again. So it was like, we're not going to do that. I want to test into classical. And I got in, and that was a whole other experience because I went from feeling like, the girl, the charity case who couldn't afford the tuition and like literally had to work in the lunchroom dumping out old milk to like pay off tuition bills, to being like, oh, I am surrounded by people who are just like me, but none of them look like me. Yeah. It was the first time in my life that I was really exposed to diversity. Mm-hmm. And, to go from this private little, mostly white school, my best friend was a black gay man. We're still friends to this day. He's down living in Texas, living his best life. Mm-hmm. But he was a minority and I was a minority, and we bonded through that, me through being the white trash girl and him being the black gay kid. So going to high school and suddenly being immersed in this world of totally different people was like, yes, finally I can do something. And I was always kind of the geek. So I ended up in some honors classes and made friends with kids, a grade ahead of me who kind of like took me under their wing. And I was super sheltered, but I was book smart. So I kind of hooked up with the kids who were street smart and maybe needed some help studying. And we really played off each other. And one of my really good friends, actually, Daryl, he is, just an incredible person who taught me a lot about poetry, particularly through hip hop and rap, and got me into like old East Coast stuff, and took me seriously. I was into poetry at that time of my life in high school. I was dealing with a lot of depression and things going on at home, and this world of music with Black artists and with people who grew up in these tumultuous situations really spoke to me. And I don't know, it just kind of changed my life to like be in that setting. And the thing I took away from high school the most was like how much I leaned on my friends. And one of the bigger things that came out of that was I finally stood up to my Aunt Allison. And funny enough, Charlotte, when the year after my mom died, she gave me this like little tape recorder set. So like kitty recorder. I still have a picture of it. Had like a red microphone. It was a cassette recorder, and it had all primary color buttons and a smiley face.
So like Fisher Price?
Yes, exactly. I think it was Fisher Price too. Yeah. I got to find the picture. But I found it in the basement one day, and I realized that it still worked. And I tested it out, and I realized I could record Allison yelling at me. And that became a game changer. So I kind of thought about it, and I like hyped myself up about this. And I told Charlotte, I'm going to do this so that she can't do this to me anymore. And she was like, please, for the love of God, just be careful. Like, don't get yourself in trouble.
How old were you at this point?
I had to have been like 14, maybe 14.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it had been going on for a while. It was nothing new, but I was getting tired of it. So one day on the way to school, Allison was kind of playing her thing again, and she was yelling, and she was hitting the car seat in front of me. I'm sitting in the back, and I'm just like, this is not going so well. I'm going to like sit as far back from her as I can. And I reached into my bag as she was yelling, and I waited, and I just hit record. And I just sat there, and we get to school, and, I get through all of that, and I get out of the car, and I step far enough away from her, and I looked in my bag, and I'd stopped it, rewound it a little bit, and hit play. And I could hear the audio. I was like, yes. So I pulled it out of the bag, and I looked at her, and I was just like, you're done. You are done with this abuse. Stop torturing my dad. Stop torturing me. Stop yelling at me. And she was just like, what? Lauren, get back here. Get back here. We need to talk. And it was like, no, we're done talking. And that was the day I walked inside, and my friends were like, are you okay? I said, no, I'm not. And they took me down to guidance, and I was able to start telling a peer counselor about what was happening.
Wow.
And that was my introduction to grief therapy, which, nowadays my friends laugh because I always talk about my grief journey. And a lot of people, if you've never lost somebody close, that might not make sense. But for me, you start a journey every time you lose someone who's close to you. And mine really started when I was 18 months old and my mom died. That was kind of the first journey. But I really started another grief journey that day where I was like grieving this fake fantasy that Allison was putting out and that I was pretending was, our real life and everything was fine. And I was like, no, this is how things really are. And, she stopped yelling at me and kind of backed off a little bit after that for the most part. And I never did anything with the recording. Just because you have something doesn't mean you use it. But it was always there. And 2009, I graduated from high school. By that point, I was already working like 30-something hours a week at this little clothing store in Barrington. So I would, before I had a car, I would go to class, and then at the end of the day, I would get downtown to the bus stop at Kennedy Plaza, and I would go to Barrington, go to work, and then go home at like 8, 9 o'clock at night, do my homework, and then get ready and get up and do it all again the next day.
Wow.
Busy little beaver.
Yeah, exactly. And like in the morning, I would take two, because I was going to school at Classical in Providence. My parents lived in Providence, but by the time I was in high school, most of the time I was living with Charlotte. It was just obviously a healthier environment.
Right.
And in the mornings, like when her schedule was different, I would take two buses in the mornings to get to school. Which, like, I think about that now. I'm like, oh, my God, taking two buses every single morning, I'm all set. But back then, it was like, this is my chance to read and to, like, listen to my music and to think about my day and get my homework done. So I looked at it as an opportunity. And that's kind of always been what I've done. So that was my opportunity. When I got a car, it was like, yes, I've got this like little Pontiac Sunfire with 100,000 miles on the dash. Woohoo, I'm free. It was exciting. But graduated from high school, went to Rhode Island College, and I first was going to major in social work. I was kind of set on that. And my family was like, well, don't pigeonhole yourself, because like we have social workers working for us in our companies. Like, you know, we know that that's where your heart is. Do something in business, and then you can do more for the community. And that was such a light bulb idea for me, that like I could do something that could make a greater impact. So I changed my major and I switched to operations management, and I graduated with my bachelor's degree in the first time in May of 2013. By that fall, when I was in the middle of the hiring process at Fidelity Investments and got a call from their security office that there was something wrong with my application and I might have lied on my education history. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, we show that you went to Rhode Island College, but you didn't graduate. I'm like, well, I've got a bunch of witnesses to this. Like, here's some pictures. What do you mean? But I'd never actually gotten my diploma. And I didn't really think about it because I don't really hang those things up. So I was like, oh, well, let me call them. I was actually missing like 4 credits to graduate. It was like 3 or 4 credits. So I had to take a gender studies virtual class while working at Fidelity, because they were kind enough where they understood it was just like a really weird situation where they let me graduate. And they passed me for it. But I ended up obviously getting those credits. So technically graduated 2014. The same time I'm working at Fidelity, I had also gotten involved with somebody who was much older than me. I say much, it was like 7 years older. And this person, we just had a lot of differences in the vision for our lives. And it became a really unhealthy situation really quickly. And something that I see play out time and time again in speaking with different families and stuff. And by 2015, my relationship with this individual just had dissolved. But on the outside, it looked fine because I didn't want to worry my family and I didn't want to let people down. And we worked at the same company. So it was like I couldn't get away.
You're
Yeah, exactly. Totally felt like that. It was like, and he was older and, you know, I didn't come from money and things like that. And it was like I didn't have all these life savings to lean back on. So I felt trapped. So I was kind of like 2015, don't know what I'm doing. And 2 days before Christmas, I got a call. It was like 8 o'clock at night from my uncle. And he said my Aunt Charlotte was in the hospital. And he's like, she wants to talk to you. Like, don't cry. And I don't, like, immediately I'm like, I'm going to cry.
Right. When they say don't cry.
Thank you. Yes, it's going to be, absolutely. And he said my aunt had been diagnosed with leukemia. And instantly it was just like, you know, you talk about grief journeys, another one began that second. And it was like, no. And she got on the phone and it was like, no way. And my life just changed because I remember the person I was with, I went up to them and was like, I can't believe this is happening. And they didn't really get it. And on Christmas, when she was finally allowed to have visitors, you know, he didn't want to go with me. And I said, you know, to myself, I said, if somebody doesn't want to go with you in the worst moment of your life, they don't deserve to be a part of the best moments. Like, I knew what I had to do. So I went with my cousins and we decorated her hospital room for Christmas. And we were able to spend some time with her. And I'm glad we did because it was the last one. A couple weeks later, I moved out of my apartment. I called in sick to work, pretended I was sick. And And then as soon as I knew he would be in the office, I had reached out to somebody on Craigslist who was looking for a roommate in a shared apartment with like 3 other people I didn't know in the middle of Woonsocket, but it was only $450 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't turn that down when you're about to be single and broke. So I reached out to this girl, and at first she's like, hey, sorry, I already rented the place. Tough luck. The next morning before I called in sick, she texted me really early, and she's like, this is weird. I already had the place rented, but I want to give you a chance. And she's like, if you want it, let me know, and it's yours. And I was like, please, like, I'll take it, but you just have to, like, trust me. I'm not being sketchy. I have to give you the cash after I move my stuff in. And she was like, what? And I'm like, I promise I'll explain. But the reason why is because the second I withdrew that money, my ex was going to get the notification to the bank account. And we lived maybe 10 minutes away from the office. So he was going to come home, and that was going to be it. So I spent the day running around like a chicken with its head cut off. I had a Fiat, which if you've ever...
fit much in that.
No.
Yeah, I'm like, of all moving vehicles, like, this is my getaway car. Like, it's like a clown car. It was not very exciting. But it was a tough day. And the toughest part was I had a dog. And my dog had really been the reason why I stayed much longer than I should have. And I knew I couldn't take him with me. So I had to say goodbye. And saying goodbye was the tough part. But that night, even in this tough little apartment with 3 strangers in the middle of a Woonsocket, having no clue what I was going to do, I finally felt like free. It was like, all right, I don't know where I'm going, but this is cool. Like, we're getting someplace. And then I had to see him at the office the next day. So, yeah. And to make matters worse, we worked on the same team. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So
awkward.
It really was. And it was like, so I'm dealing with the person who's like my mom, who is very sick. And I've just left this relationship. Nobody understood, because this was a clean-cut person from a great background who was doing well and seemed to be very loving and caring on the outside. So I remember even like sitting in the parking lot of a Walmart with my best friend and having a relative reach out and say, like, no one's perfect. Like, everybody makes mistakes. So, like, what are you looking for? Why don't you just settle for this? And I was like, I'm not settling. I didn't come this far.
Oh, no.
No. I was like, I'm not settling. I didn't come this far to settle. And that was just, I just accepted in that moment, like, I'm not settling. And so a couple months later, March of 2016, I moved into a new apartment by myself in Riverside, which was right next to where my aunt was in Barrington, a little closer to her, closer to home. And I managed to get my dog back.
Wow.
Yeah, I had written a pretty compelling letter to my landlord. And he was like, you're the first tenant in 12 years. You've been persistent enough. You made a compelling argument. If you can pay this deposit, he can come. And that was like, wow, I just won this case. Yeah. It's kind of like my first case, and it was cool for me. And then May 1st, my aunt passed away. And instantly, boom, everything changed for me, because it was like right before Mother's Day, and, just so much. So a month later, I quit my job. I had a really like super risky backup option in sales that was 100% commission. And after going through a 2-month training program and making it into this company, I realized it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't like the aggressive sales pitches. I couldn't, it just wasn't aligned with me and my values.
Because you're a Virgo.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So one day my friend convinced me to just up and quit, which is not something I'd ever done before. I always gave advance notice, and it was an exterior home remodeling company. Totally not my thing. I remember walking in with the window display and like putting it in the office, and then being like, wait, you need to sit down and talk about this. And I was like, no, you take the window back. I'm done. But then I had no backup plan. Yeah. So I'm living on my own, trying to afford an apartment, a dog, bills left and right. And what do you do with no job? So I went back to Craigslist because it worked out so well the first time. And I answered an ad for a housekeeper in Narragansett and managed to get my best friend at the time also a job. And for that whole summer, basically, I helped clean big houses in Narragansett. And for me, a lot of people I know looked at that and said, this girl went from being in this long-term relationship and looking at building a house and being in this giant company and on the way to success to you're now cleaning toilets in people's houses for cash and you can't pay your bills. What is this? And I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I was on the right track. Right. So even those days were critical for me because I had never learned budgeting from my parents. My dad woke up at 5 and he worked until 3 and he would get me from school, and he just was a hardworking man his whole life, but he was never taught personal finance. Right. So he was just a hardworking man all his life. And when I would drive to those houses to, clean bathrooms and kitchens and stuff that weren't mine, I would listen to podcasts of Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey and these different people who taught me about how to consolidate debt and set a budget and make a goal for myself. And, that was really motivating to me, even on the days when we wouldn't get paid because the girl who employed us just couldn't pay us. And then I interviewed at my present company, which is one of the larger gaming technology companies in the area. And they liked me, but they didn't hire me. They were like, hey, we're in the middle of some changes right now. We got to wait. Well, while I was waiting on them, I'm also dealing with all these bills creeping up. Right. And, cleaning toilets doesn't pay your rent every time. So I had to figure out something else to do. In the middle of all of this, one of my friends reached out. She was in the middle of an abusive relationship herself in Texas, and she needed help. It got really bad, and one day her mom called me and said, can you fly down to Houston and help my daughter get back home? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. There was no hesitation with it. This was somebody I'd known since middle school who had known everything I'd gone through, and I knew what she was going through. And so I flew down to Houston, and we drove for 29 and a half hours with 2 Weimaraners, which are bigger dogs, for those who don't know, in the back of a Chevy Tahoe.
Lisa wasn't the what kind of car did you have?
Oh, a Fiat. Can you imagine? Yeah, I know. We would have had to bungee cord the dogs to the roof. That would have been it. But that was kind of a crazy experience because we weren't just driving to move. We were driving away from a really scary situation for her. And the whole time she's getting calls from this person and their family, and they're saying all kinds of things that are scary to her. We were literally just taking turns driving and stopping at rest stops to wash up and get snacks and, then switch places and keep driving. And along the way, she had a job already planned back here in Rhode Island. But along the way, we got a call from her future VP of this company who was friends with her mom. Mm-hmm. And this woman's like, hey, can you pass the phone over to your friend Lauren, when we were in Virginia or something? I don't even know. And she spoke with me and she's like, hey, my name is Tracy and I help hire for this company. And, your friend's mom was telling me a lot about your background and things you've done. And her company was in marketing and recruiting and hiring. So it was kind of aligned with my degree in business and the work I'd done. And she's like, what are you doing now? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of in between opportunities. What do you say? Yeah. And she's like, so I would love to have you interview for a role as a recruiter. And I'm like, maybe, you sure? Maybe. And she's like, yeah, it pays. And it paid more than I'd made at Fidelity. Wow. And I was like, yes, absolutely. I can interview. When can we do this? And I got the job. I interviewed with a panel of people, and I was hired by this company. And a couple months after I was hired, the company that I'd originally interviewed for, that I work at now, reached out and said, hey, are you still interested in us? Like, sorry it took so long, but like, we're here. And it was actually perfect timing, because I would have never been able to help my friend get back up to Rhode Island. And I would have missed out on learning so many different things if I had just gotten the job and been hired that summer. So like my friends refer to it as the magnificent summer of unemployment, where it was like, this was my chance to just not work for a little bit. But I really did learn a lot. And that kind of set in motion something where I was like, oh, you can advocate for somebody and really make a difference, even if it is just for one person. Like, your actions can do something. And that was the same time I started volunteering. My best friend, she was the president of the Rhode Island Dream Center for a number of years. They help the homeless and do a lot of work in the community. And she invited me to start volunteering on their weekly food truck. And it was my first opportunity to go down to Crossroads and other shelters and meet face to face with, neighbors who've been displaced for whatever reason. And that was enlightening to me. And my best friend has a saying. She always says, we're all only one choice or one event away from a totally different life. And when I thought back on all the different events that happened in my life and all the ways that I was picked back up and the divine interventions, and then I sat there and was like, well, what's to say? Like, I could have been in the same line getting soup from somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
So it changed my mindset, and I started treating all the people that we volunteered with and alongside the exact same. Like, it was, this is my neighbor. This is my friend. This is me. You start seeing yourself in people when you start recognizing that everyone's suffering is the same. It just takes different forms. And that was kind of pivotal. So that was, 2016. I really focused on rebuilding myself. In 2017, I found my half brothers again. It was
So basically, speaking of your half brothers, yes, that was basically the first case you solved, right?
It was. That was the first case I solved. You did your homework.
I did my homework.
Yes.
See, Al, you're not the only one that does homework.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess.
It's funny. Yeah, that was the first cold case I ever solved, was my own. Yes. It was like 22, 23 years since I had seen them. And I had one picture. I didn't know their names. But I really had just gone on Google and looked up my father and saw what I could find. He passed in a car crash in 2009. It was an accident in Cranston. And I had an opportunity to speak with the survivors, both the man who was driving the Jeep he was in and the person driving the car who hit him. And both of them were very kind. The man who hit him, he felt a lot of guilt. So it was good for me to be able to talk to him, because I was also able to let go a lot of, just the doubts and the fears and all those things. And I forgave him for my dad. And, I still look and see how he's doing, because he's a father and he's a great dad who loves his daughter. And for me, it was that was an interesting opportunity. And I always just wanted, though, to find my brothers. That was my big thing all those years. Was I would tell people I was an only child, because it was just way easier
to explain everything.
Yeah, exactly. What are you going to say? But I always thought about them, and I just wanted to know, are they alive? Are they okay? And in 2017, I went on Ancestry.com, which wasn't as well known back then. They were starting to be. And I signed up for a free trial profile. And I looked up my father, because my thinking was, if somebody else is building out the same family tree as me, what are the odds? We have to be related, because who the heck is going to care enough about this guy to build out his tree? And I found somebody named Donna, and I sent her a message, and I heard nothing back, but it looked like she knew him somehow. And my free trial was coming to a close, and I was like, I'm not paying for this every month to just be let down again. So I canceled it. And I forget if it was a couple weeks or a month later or whatever, but I got an email, and it was from Donna Kelly, and she said, hey, this is your aunt. I know all your brothers. Give me a call. I want to talk to you. And I like fumbled for the phone, like, oh my God. And I remember calling her, my hand shaking, and her being like, hey, we all remember you. We've missed you so much. And it was like, my brothers are alive. All of them. And you know their names and you know where they are. And it was wild. And to get back in touch with them was just surreal. Especially I call him my little brother. My youngest half brother, he is 5 days younger than me. Our father had some fun. Yeah. But he is just, I'm so proud of him. He works so hard. He's an EMT. He wants to stay in law enforcement and helping people, and he hopes to get into the police academy. Right. Yeah, he's fantastic. And that, I remember the day I met him, like learning that he still lived in Rhode Island. I was like, all right, where are you? Like, what's your address? Like, I've got to see you. Like, let's go, like, grab dinner or something. And he was like, he's very shy. He's a lot like me. And he was like, I'm not too sure. And I was like, all right, I'm outside your house. Get out. Get in the car.
That's awesome.
And, I love my brother. I love all my brothers. And my sister, too. I have a younger half-sister named Emma, who is 16. She was kind of like an added blessing to all of this. But yeah, in 2017, I found them again. And that, it made the local news. And it was the first like cold case I ever solved.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what led to all of this.
Extremely exciting seeing them for the first time.
Yeah, it's still it takes getting used to. Like I'm now at a point where like I'm closer with my younger brother because we live in the same state. We've seen each other. We're the same age. My older brothers, they're all in like their 30s, and my oldest brother's in his 40s. All fantastic. I'm probably the closest with my oldest brother, Tommy. He's been such a rock to me through all of this, going to him with all these questions. And, he was like 16 when my mom died. So he remembered her and he was able to tell me more about her. And, that was a little surreal for me.
Right.
But it's been cool. And I'm just kind of like, I like getting to know them. But the main thing to me was always just knowing that they were alive. And that was the biggest blessing.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So now when you ditched the other guy, right? Someone's glad that you did that.
100%.
100%. Talk about your family.
Oh, yeah. So I'm here today with my agent and manager. So my agent is my daughter, Eva. She's 10. And then my manager is my husband, Eric. And he was actually my first boyfriend in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Reunited.
Oh, yeah. So when we were, I was going through all my stuff and, I met him. He was one of the first people who really like got me out of my comfort zone and like got me to sneak into concerts downtown and like 15 years old sneaking into Lupo's to go see like metal bands and stuff. So like back in the day, my dad wasn't really the biggest fan of him, I would say. So as an adult, when we met up again after, everything had happened with Charlotte and all of that, my dad was like, this is the one. And he met him again. I was like, give him a chance as an adult. And he did. And he was like, okay, I see it. And 2 days before he died, actually, we went to dinner with my dad. And we weren't supposed to go to dinner with him that night. At the time, my husband at the time was my boyfriend. He was at a union meeting. And I was just waiting for him to get out of it. And I called my dad just like, talk, and my dad was like, what are you doing? Do you want to go to dinner? And it was like, yeah, absolutely. Eric's gonna come with me. And we went and met up with him at Zorba's on Mineral Spring in North Providence. Yep. The owner, Sammy, is fantastic, along with the whole staff. They are great. We sat down, and that dinner, there was something different about it. People kept coming up to us. He was a regular there, but people kept coming up to us and talking about, oh, your dad talks about you all the time. And, oh, you're like the light of his world. And, oh, your dad's such a great guy. And we left. And I remember saying to Eric afterwards, wow, this is going to sound really weird, but it was like, I feel like I'm going to see those people at his funeral. And a week and a half later, I did.
Wow.
I was supposed to see my dad that Saturday, and he said to me, he was like, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to make it." And I was like, "What do you mean you're not going to be able to make it?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know, something kind of came up, and I don't know if he wasn't feeling well by then or not." But a couple days after that dinner, he had a heart attack, and he was 62 years old.
Wow.
And that for me was obviously devastating. He was my best friend, and that was a tough one. And it took me a long time to really absorb that loss. And by the time I did, it was, that was March of 2019. It was really not until 2020 that I started to.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it's pretty fresh. It's not that long ago. And,
yeah.
And when we spoke, we were messaging.
Yeah.
You told me how he was the smartest guy you ever known, and you were so proud of him. And what was his business?
So he works for, at the time it was called Chem Art in Lincoln. Now I think it's either Baldwin or Beacon Hill Designs. I'm sorry, I don't know it immediately. I want to say Baldwin. But he was one of the first employees at this company where he was a chemical etcher, and he made mostly gold-plated ornaments, brass ornaments, and he used chemicals to kind of make them from different molds. And those ornaments were special because they were often featured in the White House and with the Newport Mansions Historical Society.
Wow.
So we collected them over the years, and before he passed, he passed it down to me. But he was a star employee. He was there, one of the first ones. And when he passed, he'd had kind of like some words with another employee about an overtime shift. So they sent him home, and they were like, "Go cool off, come back on Monday, take a couple of days, take the weekend." And he had his heart attack a couple of days later. Wow. And it was really important for me to I met with his head of HR. I met with the man that he had that altercation with at my dad's workstation that June. And I went in, and I kind of I hadn't really allowed myself to feel the grief at that point. But I went in and I met everybody. And then when I met this man, I was like, everybody kind of give us a few minutes. Yeah. And he said to me, "I knew your dad for 12 years, and your dad taught me everything I know. And, he came to this country, and my dad taught him his trade." And he was like, "When I argued with your dad, and then he was gone, he kind of blamed himself." And I was like, "Whoa, you're not what I thought you were either. I expected some angry person, and to see somebody grieving like me again, I saw my grief in him." And I was like, "No, thank you so much. I know my dad would have said sorry to you, if he could have, so take the apology from me." And he did. And he was able to show me my dad's writing everywhere on all the number charts and stuff, and the bench where my dad had sat every day. And that was sort of such a gift at that time. And that was really impactful to me. But yeah, my dad was just an amazing person, and he was brilliant. For somebody who, he didn't have a college degree, but he didn't need one. He could tell you anything about World War II. He really is probably the one who won second place in my 6th grade science fair. He knew it was a dad competition, he said. But he was that person, and he, got me into astronomy and science, and really sparked a lifetime love of it.
Right. So you have a family now, Eric, and your Eva.
Yes.
She is your, what is she? Not your manager. She's your
she's my
agent.
agent. She's my agent.
And I hear she's quite the artist as well.
She is.
How old is Eva?
She is 10, and she just graduated from her first 8-week art course where she focused on foundational techniques for drawing and painting.
Oh,
you need an applause for that.
I don't know if they can hear it, but there's a lot of applause for you, Eva.
Yes. So come here, Eva.
Oh, goodness.
Come here. Let's say hi to our audience. Turn around. And
yes. Wave. Hey.
Hi. You're a star
You're
now.
famous.
Yes. So that's awesome. They have a great family there.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll get into Unsolved RI.
Mm-hmm.
You have a team that works with you.
Oh,
correct?
yeah.
Why don't you give them a shout out and tell us about? Oh, she's getting her cards.
Oh,
tell
yeah.
us about the members of your team and what they do for you.
So there's so many different members, and I say
Hopefully,
that
there's not like thousands because we're going to be here too long.
I mean, there's hundreds. When you start talking about the Uncovered community and just the collective impact of that platform and community, it's crazy. I would say some of the main folks, Katie Tadlock is one of the main moderators with Unsolved RI, who helps out with the social side of it and really keeps it going. And anytime there is a missing person case, she is the number one person I go to. She's helped us really make an impact on those cases by sharing them across the East Coast Missing and Unsolved group, and also the Buried Cold Cases group, which collectively there's over 250,000 members in that. So kind of a huge network to be able to share different victims who need to have their stories highlighted. So that's Katie. Then we also have Rachel Roslet, who is the head of data visualization, and she also does a whole ton of work over at the Uncovered site. She's on their leadership team, and she's amazing. She really got me onto the platform, and she's fantastic. And then there is Jolyn Rice, who she is with Cold Case Advocacy based in New York. And she's also one of the leaders of the community side of Uncovered. She's helped significantly with, when we're stuck with a case of like, how can we bring this any further? She's the one who's sort of like, let's get them connected with this person or that person. There's so many people. I'm also involved with the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Rhode Island. That's a recent one, but I'm very excited about that group. A ton of great people. And if there's any law enforcement folks listening or PIs, we're always accepting new members and would love to hear from you. I also have to give a huge thanks to Chad Priddle. So Chad Priddle is over at Paracrime TV. He is a Canadian individual who's presently living in China. And he helps visualize or revisualize, I should say, some of our case summaries. So one that always comes to mind for people is for Nicole Parsons Bucky. She was a 27-year-old mother who was killed on 9/11. Her case did not get the media attention that it needed at the time because it was 9/11.
Right.
So all these years later, we all work very closely with Robin Parsons, she is the fierce mama bear advocate for Nicole. And she's also now broadened her efforts to try and prevent the situation for other young persons who are in domestic violence situations. But anyway, Chad really brought her case back to life, Nicole's case, by putting her timeline into a short video that used a lot of like stock media, but just to give you the image of like what happened to her. But most importantly, he gave a timeline that showed this, tight space between events that really spelled out her case. And, things really took off from there. And now she's got people who are really reaching out and more attention on it, which is amazing. And he's done that for several of our cases and continues reaching out, wanting to do more. So thanks to all of those folks.
That's cool.
Othram Inc. Did you mention them? Because I read you work along with them as well.
So Othram, and public probably knows them more as DNA Solves. If you go on Facebook and you look up the DNA Solves Advocates group, those folks, they are based in Texas and they're using modern DNA testing, cutting edge technology to be able to solve cold cases, and they're really transforming the cold case game, reducing the backlog and giving long overdue justice to victims and families. I totally support their effort. And before Unsolved RI, I really channeled a lot of my energy into promoting their cases and trying to get them fully funded so that DNA testing could be done. So always grateful to them and inspired by what they're doing. And when it comes to Rhode Island cases, anytime there's, something's happened and there is a DNA sample where The subject is unidentified. I love hearing about those because that's what Othram specializes in, and they do it better than anybody. They work with the FBI and many other agencies across the nation. I would love to see them start solving cases in Rhode Island.
Now, you mentioned, I know in messaging me, it was I don't know if it was like a genetic testing that helped catch the Golden State Killer?
So the same DNA testing technology that they're using now to solve cold cases is the exact same kind that was used to catch the Golden State Killer. I want to say it was 2018. It was like right after I got reconnected with my brothers. And the same exact method that I used to find them, they used just a much more advanced version of that, where you're taking the DNA sample. And yes, you don't have this person in CODIS, which is the standard database that law enforcement always used. And CODIS looks at like 10 to 20 different markers for DNA analysis to try and produce a match, versus modern DNA testing, where you're looking at tens to hundreds of thousands of unique identifiers to pull a profile on somebody. So what they do with investigative genetic genealogy, which is the technique that was used to catch him, and kind of like, my backyard version of it to find my brothers, they took the killer's DNA sample, and then you just shake down the family tree.
Yeah, they found like an eighth cousin that once removed, or some crazy thing like that.
And you just trace through census records and family records and social media. I'm sure that was a monumental effort, and tons of people involved, obviously, but that's becoming the norm.
Oh, that's interesting. They've come a long way in all this. Cool. Can you name a case or two that you worked on that has been solved?
So nothing yet has been solved as far as the cold cases go, but when it comes to missing persons, that's my passion, is missing persons, or helping locate missing persons, I should say. Between December of last year and March of this year, we helped locate 4 missing persons.
Oh, really?
Wow. Yeah, including a mother of 3 who'd been gone for over a month, a United States veteran who went missing for 2 weeks without a trace, a 13-year-old girl. She was actually from Massachusetts, but we wanted to help out our neighbors when we were directly contacted by family friends. She was moved to Massachusetts 2 hours north, and she was successfully located before she was moved to Florida.
Wow.
So she was found, and then also an 11-year-old boy. He was all over the news. He went running out of his house on Christmas night with no shoes on, and he was found several days later in somebody's junked car in their backyard. And the guy had seen all the media about what was going on, and that was what prompted him to call when he saw some movement in the car.
That's excellent. I mean, it must be very fulfilling when when someone is found and you're part of the process to.
Yeah,
find them.
I still have the text too from the lead detective on that little boy's case. You can't really put that into words, but it's like, I remember being out there with volunteers, like unsolved volunteers, a couple nights before he was found, or the night before he was found, putting up flyers. It was like 30 degrees out, freezing cold, there's snow, your fingers are frozen as you're trying to put these things on telephone poles. You're worried about, like, am I safe out here? But we had so many people from the community helping us, and it was like everybody, like that little boy was everybody's son for those few days. And when that detective texted me and he said, "We got him, he's okay," it was just like, whoa. And he actually was kind enough to give me a call later on that day, like obviously once all the chaos died down. And he said, we just wanted to say thank you to your team for assisting the effort. And what was cool is we were partnered with the Rhode Island Canine Search and Rescue group for this. They are a nonprofit organization, fantastic folks led by President Jim Rowley, And he reached out to us. I think it was this case was the first one, that little boy, and he wanted to help. So we were keeping him updated the whole time as we were kind of like streamlining communication for all these different groups. And the detective had said to me, if that last lead hadn't panned out, the state police actually didn't have any dogs available. We were going to call your guy and have you guys come in and run the scent trail. And it was like, whoa, that was the first sign of like, we're doing something here, that like, putting something in place that can be that fail safe for an agency, or that can be that sign of relief for a community member. And I have to give huge credit. It's funny, you made your, what was it you say, like uno dos or something in the beginning when you were saying your Spanish.
Oh, yeah. I forgot it now. Episodia dos.
Dios mío.
That's a something.
But it's funny you say that, because that little boy's case was the first time that we introduced missing person flyers in Spanish and social media posts in Spanish, because his family primarily spoke Spanish at home and he came from a Hispanic neighborhood. So why are we going to be out there with English posters and flyers like, oh great, someone's missing, I have no idea. So we started to translate, and now that's always something that we ask when we're approaching a case is this in an area where there's a different language that's primarily spoken or written? What nationality is this person? How can we not only make sure we're communicating effectively, but also pay proper tribute to their heritage and not misappropriate them? So that was really important, and we got the whole community involved. And to me, that was sort of my first sign of like, wow, we can make this happen. We really can have this community that helps solve these cases and keeps people safe and makes an impact. So, gracias to the entire Hispanic community that helped, because they all got that little boy home.
And it must be tough when the families come to you. It must be like that wit's end sort of. You know what I'm saying? As far as people care about that, people, unless it happens to you, I'm sure you can't understand what that's like to go through somebody, child missing, or what you went through, or anything else like that.
Or worse, I'm wearing an Olivia's Army shirt, which this is an important one. And when we talk about giving shout outs and giving thanks, more than that, I wanted to, if I can, take a couple minutes to give some support.
Absolutely.
So for those who haven't heard, Olivia Pazzaretti, she was a 17-year-old girl who was killed on her way home from ringing in the new year with her sisters. And she wasn't impaired. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just having fun with her family. And she was hit by a repeat offender, a career criminal, who had a suspended license charge on his record and all this other stuff, and had made notes stating his intent to go out and commit a crime prior to doing this. And he hit Olivia's car on the highway. She went off the road, flipped, and hit a tree, and she was pronounced on the scene. That was January 1st, just after midnight. We are now approaching May, and this individual still has not, the one who killed Olivia, still has not been charged with anything close to murder or vehicular homicide or anything like that, despite, he even ran from the scene.
Was this the person that was driving a...
This is a person we
work with.
Yes.
Is
uncle.
Her uncle.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's it's Steve, like there's everybody knows about Olivia or knows her family, and they've been such a part of this community for so long. But a few weeks after she was killed, my cousin Jared actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I know her aunt, and I've been talking with her, and this is a nightmare situation. Like, can Unsolved RI do anything to support this?" And I was like, well, we do, missing persons and cold cases. And I took one look at it and said, and now I guess we do this too. It was just such an obvious thing. So I reached out to Janine. Janine is Olivia's mom, Janine Pazzaretti Malloy, and Dennis Malloy, who is Olivia's stepdad, Janine's husband. Amazing people. And really just... to talk to them, it takes your breath away. It takes all the words. And they really motivated me to just speak out more and to be more active and to be more supportive. And we got really innovative to keep Olivia's story at the top of people's news feeds because, people were reporting posts about her and trying to get Janine silenced. And to be able to create a page on Unsolved RI for Olivia and to send out that message of we don't accept hate for victims and we're not going to stand for repeat offenders constantly getting to slide because, that's just the way it's always been done. A month and a half after Olivia's gone, Matthew Dennison, another local standout kid who had a whole life ahead of him, he was also killed by somebody, an impaired driver. Both of these families, Olivia's family and Matthew's family, they don't have resolution. And every day they are being dragged through their grief in front of the public and in front of politicians for what? And that's something where the Uncovered team and everybody at Unsolved RI, we sit down and we don't want people to be paraded across media and have their trauma used for ratings or for whatever. It's what can we do to turn consumption into advocacy? How can we help? And, Olivia's family, I'm just really grateful to them as well because, we've been able to support. And I wore the shirt today just to kind of send that message of if you haven't yet, please sign her petition to ask the state, demand the state to actually please protect innocent people and deliver some justice. And we've got links to everything to support her story and learn more on Unsolved RI.
Okay,
that's great.
She seemed like she had the world ahead of her. She's
absolutely
bright young lady, talented. I'm sure the boy was too, and it is a shame.
Yeah, Olivia was a black belt in karate. She, if anybody looks her up on TikTok, she was known for posting dancing, happy videos that were uplifting and shared motivational messages for people. She was finally coming into her own and being comfortable with who she was in life and as a person. And Matthew, same thing. He was on his way back with his friend Kevin and teammate Kevin. He was the captain of his hockey team, the West Warwick, Exeter, West Greenwich team. They were at a prospecting event in Connecticut and were coming back from that. So it's like another innocent life that is ruined for no reason. Yeah. Here we are. It's been almost 5 months for Olivia and, almost 4 months for Matthew, and there's still no resolution.
Yeah. So take the time to visit Unsolved RI and do sign that petition to help Olivia and her family out. So speaking of cases, we haven't even begun to talk about your mother's case. So so we're over an hour into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to end it here, Al, and we're going to make this a two-parter.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, because we usually do an episode every month, so we're going to do it a week apart. So
cool.
We will see you next week, and we'll be wearing the same clothes next week. So we'll see you next week on What's Your Story.
Thank you.